Welcome to our panel discussion on transforming supply chain to raise performance now and next. We'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Vivek Puri, Global Practice Lead, Customer Experience Solutions, Brillio. May I also present to you Mr. Ramkesh, Jangra, Head, SEC Supply, Ericsson. A very warm welcome to Mr. Seetharam, AS Director, SCM and Customer Support, Harman International, India. A very warm welcome to Mr. Sanjay Mukherjee, Senior Director, Supply Chain Management, Whirlpool, India. May I also extend a warm welcome to Mr. Sandeep Srinivasan, Vice President, Digital and Analytics, HTL Technologies, and a very warm welcome to Mr. Sanjeev Aggarwal, Director, Supply Chain Management, Hafele, India. Moderating this session is going to be Ms. Sudeepta Veerapaneni, Director, Deloitte, our knowledge partners. Thank you all for being a part of this very interesting panel discussion, where we'll be discussing a lot more on how we can make it more efficient, more agile, more flexible. It's all in the game of digital supply chain. Look, also how we can use technology and digital innovation go hand in hand. It's time to really accelerate supply chain digital transformation. Over to you now.
Thank you for the warm introduction, and very welcome to the audience and the fellow panelists. The past 2 years, if you ask me, has many firsts that we have seen, starting with the COVID pandemic, the mass vaccination, migrant crisis, and then now finally to the Suez Canal crisis. Who ever thought? And it looks like it's going to end, but we never know. The global supply chains, if you look at it, were never really meant for anything like COVID-19. They were really meant or built for very predictable environments, which were high volume and maximum efficiency. And today's topic, we are going to speak about digital and resilient supply chains, and really looking at how digital is going to help us, make supply chains more resilient and agile. And if you look at it, predominantly there are 4 pillars against which we say a resilient supply chain: visibility, flexibility, collaboration, and control. And we'll explore all of these a bit in today's discussion. Starting with you, Vivek, your views on how you think we can try and design better supply chains, resilient supply chains, and where do you see are the biggest impediments or roadblocks in supply chain transformations?
Well, thank you, Sudeepta. So as you rightly said, I think with the COVID and with the changing customer behaviors, need for new business models, working at a fairly fast pace, the whole world is getting disrupted across different industries, and supply chain plays an important role. I think, one big thing I would say is that, we need to start looking at a value orientation for supply chain than just a cost efficiency orientation. And towards that, I feel, there are 3 big levers in terms of, as you start thinking about, developing, agile, fast, with speed, and also with amount of, resilience, like for the modern, supply chains. The first one I would say is to try and break monoliths, because the modern day, as you're looking at getting the agility, it's important to kind of start, breaking the monoliths, which drives the collaboration between, within the enterprise as well as across the digital ecosystem, because there are different partners, vendors, the transportation carriers and whatnot, right, and customers, right. So I think it's important, as you look at, breaking the monoliths to kind of drive the data visibility and collaboration across the supply chain. And this is easier said than done, because it involves a fair amount of modernization of legacy solutions, into more modern microservices and other, cloud-based architectures. And I think that's the key here, in terms of, how can we make data really, available and visible at the right time, to make the right decision, right? So, and that's an important part of, I would say, breaking the monoliths. Now, a few real life examples, we've been working with a number of clients, but, those come to mind as, we are partnering with around the world's largest cold storage, logistics company. And very interesting as they're trying to completely, re-innovate themselves as a technology company, more than just a logistics company. And in that regard, as we look to work with them, for example, how do we integrate and get on board various disparate warehouse management systems in quick time, so that they can really collaborate with each other, right, in real time. And as they're doing more and more acquisitions, need to kind of build that whole digital backbone to really get that going, right. Another example from the product lifecycle management world, working with a discrete manufacturing company where you look at the entire cycle of how you get an order, then goes to design and then goes to different manufacturing locations of third parties, right? Now, we've been working in terms of trying to get a completely modernized architecture, which allows collaboration across maybe more than 2,000 stakeholders, and that really helps to kind of reduce the cycle time that it takes, and also the right level of visibility to kind of do the whole design cycle, so that the production planning efficiency can be really improved, right? Example that comes to mind in terms of breaking monoliths is the whole term we call as omni-channel nowadays. That's a pretty talked about term, but truly, what does it mean, right? So, like working with like for example, for a specialty retailer, as they're looking at different equipments in B2B, B2C world, like bathroom fittings, kitchen, equipments, HVACs and stuff. Um, it's fundamental for their business to really scale and scale through stores equally, and that's like their own stores as well as their acquisition. That puts a lot of load on the IT and digital to really service that in a truly omni-channel manner. So one real life example is, like for example, it takes almost 12 hours to do the whole replenishment planning for a store, right? And if you try and collapse that to a 3-hour window, the stores can operate a lot more better, serving customers in a much better manner, right? So it's all about the whole theme of how we can get to greater level of agility and through modernization of the legacy solutions. The second lever I would say in the three part is really like looking at how can we really improve some of the fundamentals of supply chain processes, the ways of doing things, which really like gives us a very different outcome. So for example, Brillio has been working to develop solutions in areas of, like for example, smart warehousing, right? Where as you look at the current warehousing processes, and you look at automating them and using technologies like IoT and mobile apps to really get to better level of inventory planning, inventory accuracy, space optimization, aisle movements, asset in locations based on IoTs. So that really helps to kind of just get the whole operations a lot more agile and a lot more accurate. Like we all know that how important it is to get the right view of the inventory across all stakeholders in near real time, right? So some of the concepts of like coming back to the point, larger point is really trying to make these processes fundamentally more efficient and more nimble, and using technology to kind of change the way we do things, from that perspective. And the third part I would say, like of the puzzle is really, how well are we leveraging data? That's a key part. And I think, like there's one aspect of getting the operational agility, but then there's another important part of, making sure that we are leveraging data to drive the right, strategic decisions, like which give like a greater level of, overall, scalability and resilience and performance to the supply chains. So as an example, as we're working with the same cold storage company, we kind of looking at, supply chain 360 solution, which is very similar to a customer data platform. We've got supply chain data platforms, which really enable you to process and harmonize the data, and then start building, meaningful insights on it using data sciences, right? So, like aspects like demand forecasting, churn prediction, market mix modeling, all of these are hugely impacting supply chains today, because the customers, like behaviors are changing so much, right? And it's rapidly evolving towards a very different mix of buying. So, like many examples of this, like nature, where you're like trying to curate data into data lakes which can be connected across the organization. So also, like looking at how can customer intelligence drive supply chain performance. So we don't look at supply chain only as a cost lever. We can actually, like for example, we can run campaigns based on like our inventory situations across the network, and those could actually give us much better revenue outcomes. And also in terms of how fast can we serve customers in the modern day world, right? So like a number of such like cases, but again, coming back to the three big points of trying to break monoliths, get them more agile, like rapidly reduce your like our turnaround times. B is to really fundamentally look at technology of how we do things differently, like a way we've been doing it. Then the third part being how well are we leveraging data as an asset to drive strategic, insights and even predict, well. And I would just want to conclude maybe, the last part I would say is while we say all of that, I think there are some big impediments, as you look at doing these journeys, which from the real life, scenarios. And I think a couple of them would be just to highlight would be just to, where to start and, how to really think about this as a value stream, right? Because sometimes the problem looks so enormous that unless we really identify the right value streams and say, okay, I'm going to really get the maximum value out of doing this in a in a product engineering model or a mindset, it becomes difficult to kind of look at the whole problem at large, right? And then start to build on that, as you go forward and find those pockets of value and then demonstrate progress and move forward from there. And the other way I would, the other couple of things would be just the change of mindset of looking at supply chain not as a backend function, but I would say the front stage and the backstage have to come together to really drive that experience. And that's where supply chains are so important. And one last area is about a lot about change management, workforce training, reskilling, how as we use these new technologies in the in the various locations and various parts of the supply chain. So that's an enormous activity, but it's normally very underestimated because it takes a lot of effort and planning to really get to a good level of change management. And finally also talent. I think a lot of the areas we need to kind of figure out how we can get the right talent in, which can really bring out this kind of transformation that we're looking at and solving these problems.
Excellent points, I think, Vivek, and it was a very comprehensive view that you have given, right? Looking at change management, breaking the monolithics, making the data available, and I think great examples that you were able to bring across. With that, I will just switch gears and go to Ramkesh. And essentially, I wanted to understand, we talk a little, I mean, this whole session is about digital and supply chain disruptions, right? So where do you see, how important do you see digital being in this, and what kind of impact that you would have seen, looking at digital and bringing that to the supply chain space?
Thanks, Sudeepta. I hope I'm audible to all of
Yes,
you.
audible.
See, very important questions, and why an organization or a company need digitalization at all. To understand the importance of it, or say business importance, it is vital to have digitalization. Tool and technology are getting upgrade or updated, or new tool and technologies are making old tool and technology as a old or out of fashions. We need to upgrade ourselves as per the time and the present ecosystems. There are various benefits to have digitalization in one's organizations. A few of them are it increase efficiency of the organizations, and second one is reduce human error. If you are doing everything paperwork or manually, then there are chances that we are wasting time, or there might be some errors. And by having digitalization tool, we reduce human error. It do complete or thorough data analysis. By having digitalization equipments, you can do a thorough data analysis and reach to a right and logical conclusion in a very short span of time. And safer data storage, by example, cloud storage, and there are various other options also. Your data of unlimited size can be stored in a very small portion of space. And next one is connect with ecosystem. By example, in recent time, government of India decided to collect toll charges only through digital payment method. If you are not upgrade yourself, and initially it was challenge, and people were thinking how we can expect truck drivers to have digital equipments and to be educated to handle digital payment systems. But when government forced it, and it was easily adaptable and taken up by the truck drivers level people as well. And not only truck drivers, during lockdowns, I observed maximum of the retailers, even say sabji walas and even a small retailer of ready size, they are also accepting payments through digital method of system. So we need to be connect with ecosystem. We have to upgrade ourselves. And next important point is a right information availability, where we can judge where is the demand and where is the supply of service and goods. Accordingly, we change and we plan our business strategies. It also eliminate waste, uh, wasteful activity, and save time of the organizations and the team. And easy payment process, be it toll charges, as I referred earlier, and whether it is vendor payment or collection from your customers, be it. Digitalization is also very innovative and supportive in production, in R&D as well. If you see earlier, the medicines, any medicines which were innovated was taking around 10 to 11 years in the market. And during COVID emergency throughout the world, there are many companies who complete all exercises and launch the medicine in 11 months or 12 months, which has become a boon, and is only possible by having digitalized technology, faster communication technology, and data sharing. Yes,
Fantastic
Sudeepta.
points, fantastic point, Ramkesh. And one key takeaway for me is definitely the elimination of waste, right? Which is through which digital we have been looking at. Every year, Gartner does a survey of the top supply chains in the world, and you would have seen that the same companies sort of reappear every time, whether it is Cisco, Colgate, Palmolive, P&G. These are the best run supply chains that are out there, and most of these, they leverage digital, and they're not doing digital now. They've been doing digital for quite some time. So with that, I'll invite Sanjay, who's a veteran in this space, and I would like to get his views while this session is about digital, but really looking at digital plus non-digital kind of initiatives that companies would have taken, and some learnings and experiences from the pandemic that you would have seen, Sanjay.
Thanks, Sudeepta. I think you said rightly that possibly from my side, it will be more from a practitioner supply chain rather than a digital space. But I would like to also say, from a practitioner perspective, day in, day out, we use the digital space. What does it mean? And in that space, for me, there are 5 big pillars. I start talking about digital development, and then the next 2, digital intelligent supply chain. We talked about smart factory. We talked about synchronized planning. That is nothing but end-to-end planning. Then dynamic fulfillment. And then finally, how are you connecting your customers? And that's what, in my space, what digital means. Now, in this particular subject, you also referred the Gartners. If you really ask me, Gartner says that hardly 50% of the organization is having a real good a roadmap for their supply chain digital transformation. And out of that, hardly 70% of the smart manufacturing is integrated. Not even 70% of the smart manufacturing is integrated with the digital supply chain. And that's the stage we are in when we are talking about right practitioners. Now, coming back to the pandemic, yes, if you really ask me, that in this kind of pandemic, when everything was almost standstill for 2 months, and almost the last 2 years, it was very difficult for every organization, starting from assessing the demand, disruptions in supplies, availability of laborers, maintaining the safety protocols, international shipping scenarios. You also referred that the cost increase all front in terms of material, fuel prices, semiconductor availability, etc., etc. I think the biggest challenge for any supply chain professional, how do we fulfill our customer demand in this dynamic, continuous changing time? And we have no other option but to be very, very agile and flexible, continuously recalibrate our plan. When I say plan, it is a plan for our production plan, our vendor assessments, assessing our vendor reliability, tracking the vendor suppliers, and etc., etc., and also the optimized cost, and to draw between a very fine balance between what to do and what not to do. Now, if you really ask me, how do we do that? And for me, unless and until we have a end-to-end connected digital supply chain, and that's not possible. Okay, and I think for any organization in the consumer space, or in a manufacturing space, or in an internet space, whether it's Amazon, Flipkart, unless and until you have end-to-end visibility of your materials, of your products, of your movements, it's impossible to manage. So that's what the biggest learning, if you ask me, during this pandemic. And I think more and more organizations are realizing that fact, that from a traditional supply chain, the way we used to manage our supply chain earlier, to convert that into a semi-digital to a finally end-to-end digital, what we talks about. And that's where I think the most realizations are for every organization, not only for me. And I think whenever I'm talking to my friends and uh, counterparts across CPG and the durables and other industries, I think the voices are very, very similar towards that. And if you really ask me, a very effective and digital supply chain environment, which can give you an end-to-end visibility, help you to dynamically change your plan and optimize your cost, ensure predictability, and manage efficiency in delivery. And that's where I think where makes a lot of a difference, not only to your deliver to your consumer promise, but also manage your top line as well as the bottom line. And what I also see, I was studying some of the case studies with one of the very large consulting firm. They talked about your resilient supply chain can give you a very high accelerated on the revenue growth. They talked about improved customer satisfaction, and to the extent of 20 to 40% increase in customer satisfaction. They talked about and they talked about your increase in savings and cash flow. And they also talked about minimizing your risk and increase resilience. So I think that's where the game is, and that's where possibly the digital space can do a lot more. When I started my career 20 years back, that point of time, supply chain, very few people used to talk about supply chain. It's more of a transport department or logistics department. Now supply chain is one of the prominent function. And let me tell you my experience, supply chain is no more a cost center. It can generate profit for the organization. Okay, so I think that is where the change coming in supply chain, and that is where the digital space can do a lot more by bringing that end-to-end connectivity and the visibility. And that's what I from my side.
No, absolutely. I think Sanjay, you brought out some really great points. Definitely looking at digital supply networks, which is really the interconnection between your make, source, plan, and deliver kind of a thing. And definitely, whoever thought in this pandemic, right? For Whirlpool, who thought, I don't know, there'll be surge in dishwashing equipments like that. So definitely, pandemic has really brought out some of those consumer trends which nobody would have imagined as well. Similarly, I think the other two gentlemen that I would want to speak to is Sanjay and then Seetharam, both from a consumer perspective, right? And the pandemic really transformed the consumer landscape for them. If you look at Hafele, essentially work from home scenario got exaggerated, and really looking at how some of the digital innovations can be looked at. So I'll request Sanjay to share his views on how the digital innovation was brought about as part of the pandemic and something which is going to stay on for longer there.
Hi, Sudeepta. Thank you to giving me a chance. And I just want to take your example. You talk about dishwasher because throughout last year this became a hot product. But before I come on this topic, I will take from the Sanjay point where he left. Yes, I also see supply chain from backstage now move to the front stage or a prime function. Any company who talk about overall value chain talk about supply chain. Otherwise, in India, supply chain, as Sanjay also mentioned, was the purchase department, logistic department, or transportation department. Now the whole definition, I think common men start understanding about supply chain. So in the pandemic time when business is not normal, I think most of us is still not going office 100%. Still your company earning revenue close to pre-pandemic or into that particular band. And most of us belong to a tangible product company, not about supply chain services I'm talking about. So that's a true reflection how you integrate the information flow. and how you make a movement tangible for your product flow. And most of these things is happening seamlessly because all of a sudden we all stop going to the office one day and start working from home. So there's no change over time. There's no BCP done for that. Oh, you work from 1 week from your home and can you run your operation or not? It's happened all of a sudden 22nd of March and 23rd you all start working from home. So there's no company BCP side working, nothing is working, but initially there was a challenge on that. So primarily you see the integration of the information flow as talked also. I'm not trying to talk about digitalization again, but I try to talk two aspects of that. Merging of information flow and the product flow. When we talk about supply chain, primarily we talk about tangible product movement, either delivering to you or delivering to your end customer. Supply chain services can also be a topic, but end of the day, when you talk about end-to-end supply chain, like plan, how you plan, what is your demand forecast, almost impossible for any sales force to drive the demand. And now I'm coming to your example, and we also witnessed that last year about June, no company in India have a dishwasher. And this product in India is not selling because we all have a very cheap maid coming at home, they're cleaning the dish, all of a sudden the dishwasher demand is started. We also struggle a lot to bring the dishwasher. The person or the company who can promise to any delivery for dishwasher is a king. And today, most of us sitting on the dishwasher inventory because all the sales team keep on focusing, yes, this product will go. Now, I think all the company have access supply for that. So again, the digitalization of the market intelligence comes into the picture. I'm not purely talk about data. I will talk about taking data or digitalization to the next level, converting to be sensible as a knowledge to the business and support you for your decision making into that. So a lot of company we have a ERP, but in my opinion, we will say ERP is more sales and finance oriented. Very few company have true ERP running end-to-end covering supply chain. And the most important aspect, your demand forecast cycle is missing. What happened from your purchase order release to receiving the goods in your warehouse is missing. These are the lags which are missing. The goods which move out from your warehouse, how is reaching to your end customer is missing. So very, very few companies have an integrated information system, and where each module is integrated and you can make a decision on that. What all we working on that is strength for any company to deliver from home. You need to have a very nice dashboard or the cockpit where you can see end-to-end connection, because other than your warehouse guy, almost everyone is working from home. So information is key, but how you integrate this information, how you drive seamlessly end-to-end single data point, data harmonization, and converting data to the knowledge is the next level what we talk about. Second point I want to touch base when we talk about industry 4.0 and then supply chain 4.0 is nothing but about moving from traditional to integrated IoT based supply chain. Again, is it difficult for anyone to go to the office maybe 6 months before, and then how you using the bot or RPA, transforming the information, integrating all this part. So all of these are a very important churn happen in last 1 year. Although I will say most of us are in nascent stage. We all talk about digitalization, but we talk about digitalization in silo. Very few companies have integrated data architecture which connecting everything to the one stream and using as a decision portal. That's what is the next phase is needed for the industry when we talk about digitalization. That's my opinion on that. Second point, which also touch base about transportation, connecting to the customer, delivering to the customer, the checkpoints is getting automated. I don't know touch about all this thing, but few things is also important, which is a tangible product. Today, you will see there is a one factory globally, and I want to name the country. Other than that, from where you source today, what is the lead time in that particular place? Most of the company could not fulfill because they do not have China plus one strategy. So it's good we all talk about supply chain, digitalization, visibility, but end of the day, we also need to see the product consistent delivery to the end customer. Because customer experience comes from the product. I'm not talking about service supply chain, but all of us deliver the product and customer satisfaction comes if I deliver everything what I promised to them. And how can you promise to a customer unless or until you do not have your backend integrated into that? So long way to go. Yes, a lot of talk has started in this direction in last 1.5 years. It become a key word everyone talk about, but still we need to evolve, need to go to the next phase.
Excellent. I think, Sanjeev, what is heartening for me to see is that all of you are core supply chain professionals, and you mentioned about having one single architecture. That is really heartening to see that the technology and the digital is really seeping into these areas. And certainly, I think both Sanjay and you mentioned that it's no longer a back-end operations, and really some of these are happening in boardroom. Decisions are being taken place around this, certainly around that. And I think the key takeaway for me is the linkages that you need to have, right, along all the functions, so that it performs like a symphony, like you orchestrate like a symphony that you're looking at. So with that, maybe I'll invite Seetharam, and again, similar space that you come from. Again, COVID pandemic sort of amplified the whole customer demand side. Maybe some examples or learnings from there.
Thank you, Sudeepta. So, being in the consumer durables or electronics organization brought in a lot of challenges, especially during the pandemic. There was a severe spike in demand with the pandemic when we had supply challenges and also the constraints what we have in the market as such, right? There was a severe shift in the technology also because of the pandemic. Many people were brought into the work from home culture all of a sudden, so they did not have the tech in place to work or evolve on that work from home culture as such. Right? So we had to shift some of the technologies. We had to fast track some of the technologies to bring in and adapt to the consumer demand, which was spiking up. Right. That brought in a lot of market analysis based on which we had to fast track some of the portfolios and the products to bring in for a better consumer experience as such. Right? This also turned us internally, right, in most of the companies as such, right, how vulnerable is the supply chain for every organization, because most of us who are dependent on imports from certain countries and everything, how with the political turmoil and everything, how it was rapidly changing over a period of time. Lot of uncertainties which came up in the last 1.5 years, which shifted a lot of our organizational strategies as such, right, for the long run. So we started digging in internally. We fundamentally transformed some of the key supply chain processes to make it more agile, flexible, to bring it more customer centric as such. And second, as Sanjay and Sanjeev brought in, data is the key here for most of the organizations now. How to bring in integrated data to make it with a much more meaningful inferences, right? That was something which we rapidly worked on, and most of the organizations, I think, they are working on this space because everything is segmented, from demand forecasting to the channel inventory to your sellout. All this information, your market information, is all segmented. You don't have it in a holistic view. How do we bring into a holistic view so that which actually drives your demand forecast and makes your system more agile, so that you can have meaningful interpretations of how the market is actually shifting? We saw, as I mentioned earlier, we saw a rapid shift in consumer technology within like 6 months. There was a rapid shift in technology. We had to replace one of the technology platforms such as. Because of the technology shift, it made the product itself more affordable to the market as such. Right now, which was only consuming almost like 10% market share. Now it is commanding more than like 15%, 50% market share based on the trend which is moving into the consumers. So with that kind of a holistic view, with the market interpretations, if we can bring it into a single platform, which is available to all stakeholders, that helps faster decision making as such within any organization. Along with that, a lot of predictive analytics, which can be brought in, based on which every organization can benefit on the fluctuations in demand. Because if we think that there can be 100% accurate demand forecasting from Salesforce, that's a flawed expectation as such. It can never happen. So we will have to suit ourselves or be agile to ensure that the fluctuation is met as such. So how do we make ourselves robust in terms of supply chain to cater to that? That is what this predictive analytics helped us a lot, right? And second was on the in the digitization aspect as such. So it's not like 100% every organization can go into or invest into the digitization. So it's a step-by-step process as such. So we started small, investing with the robotic process automations, with mini bot optimizations for your monotonous tasks, which is involved in your day-to-day supply chain operations, be it in your warehouse or in your order management. So these things, if we can combine with this robotic process automations, it can help us to bring down the cost as well as time and effort what we spend in the supply chain processes. So in that aspect, there was a lot of things being done by other companies also. Like generally, many organizations, big organizations, rely on 3PL operators. Plus, we have separate ERP functions for the organization. So how best we can have a reconciliations done between the WMS of your 3PL operations and your ERP, the stock reconciliations, how best we can automate these things, and the compliance activities, because most of us have to abide by this legal metrology norms, especially in the product companies. How do we make some of the compliance activities automated process, which can bring down some of the cost and time? And for your customers as well, the visibility is a very integral part for them, that what is happening to their entire order systems as such. How are we efficiently delivering the end-to-end process? If we can make it visible for them through digitization, it helps a lot. So on these aspects, I think there is a lot of things which happened in the last 1.5 years overall in the supply chain process. If you see an active example especially during the lockdown time, the pharma sector and the food sector, how they delivered to every home what was required was really amazing, because that was ensured by the best supply chain processes which was installed, right? Even with the constraints, whatever they had, they put their lives at risk, and then they ensure that every common man sitting at their home gets what they need, right? So this was all driven through supply chain process. So as Sanjeev and Sanjay mentioned, this is no longer a support function anymore, right? It's a prime function going forward. And I think most of the organizations are feeling that how best the supply chain process, if you invest on digitizing or evolving your processes, it will set up the future for your organization as well. Right.
So absolutely great points. And I think all of us having gone through the pandemic, we will, I think, go down the history like legends to, having witnessed something like this. And some great learnings that have come across through the pandemic in the supply chain space, and how the digital solutions sort of helped resolve some of those constraints that we were looking at. Maybe Sandeep, over to you. You would sort of bring in, I think, hopefully you'll bring us some interesting examples of how you had seen clients leveraging data and some of these digital technologies to be able to make such leapway in terms of sort of facing the pandemic and then sort of moving forward.
Sure, thank you, Sudeepta. Yeah, so one thing that's surely going to be tough for me is going last, almost like the end of the supply chain with the last mile delivery problems that most people have. And while I get to the problem of solving the last mile and what's happening in the world today, I think there are a few things, right? The word digital and end-to-end supply chain, I think, have reflected multiple times over by my co-panelists, what we've heard and seen. I want to provide a very different perspective, right? Technology has been around for a long time, and it has been used to support the supply chain or the delivery of products, goods across vendors, partners, customers for a long period of time. But I think there's a point in time with the current technology that's available that is changing the dimension significantly. The first point is data was costly to store, manage, and it was really difficult to do it in the past. I think from a technology standpoint, it's become a lot more easier to hold data, manage it, store it, and use it. That's the first thing, right? That is a paradigm shift in which how data and technology can support any processes, not just supply chain processes, but any process, even customer experience processes or anything. I think the second point that's changing, and this is something that everybody should start looking at closely, right? And you look at the digital natives, the Ubers of the world or DoorDashes of the world, I think they're looking at the world very differently. They're not looking at it from a process-centric standpoint. And I think that's a word that most people have used, supply chain processes, supply chain process, end-to-end view. That's a constant tone, right, from most of the business colleagues. And I'm providing a view that's more further down than what it is today. I think the technology of the day allows us to start thinking about the world of supply chain and the world of supply and demand using events, more like neural events that are there in our brain. And so moving from a point where you sense and react to predict and act, right? So I think that's the paradigm shift that I'm seeing in the market. There are companies, especially digitally native companies, that are starting to think about what will happen and then build and take steps on today's date, right? So that's a big shift, paradigm shift, which data is enabling. And that enablement is primarily because of data, AI, ML, and data science. There is enough algorithms. Now, people might ask, okay, why didn't this happen 10 years ago? It's simple. 10 years ago, the technology of the day did not support this activity. You always thought of a supply chain as a sequential step of 15 things. And if something went wrong, you did an exception processing, or you did something that, okay, I'm going to bypass. I'll give you an example. I think somebody mentioned about a possible supply chain of cold storage, right? I'll give you an example. Perishables shipping from South America to the east coast of North America. Very, very common scenario, because let's say banana and fruit, it's very common. It goes from South America to North America. A tornado hits the coast of Florida. You can't dock your ship there. That means this perishable has to go into some warehouse within a very short span of time. And that's real-time thinking, right? The technology 5-6 years ago was a struggle to get this real-time thinking into it, right? It was there, but it was not fully there. I think the technology, what the digital natives have enabled with the Facebooks, Googles, the kind of technology they've provided, I think we are able to do something around this, right? The visibility, the control you can have over the supply chain is significant. I think that's the biggest change that I would say, and I see happening today. The second point is that moving away from a dynamic set of sequential events to something like a random set of events. Can I make it random? Like, I'll give you that as an example. Southwest Airlines in the US uses a hub and spoke model to transport their folks, right? And it's a classic case study. If you go into the supply chain area, it's a classic case study. The challenge they have is if one of their spoke planes misses a hub, all the passengers on that sector and the next spokes are going to miss their flights, right? And it's going to cost significantly for them. How do they build a model which will ensure that they can predict what baggages? Do they need to cancel a flight? Do they need to take a new flight? What do they do? So I think all of those predictions have become a lot easier with data science evolving and data evolving, the cost of data coming down. And the last topic that I think I'm going to highlight is all of us live at home today, work from home, and micro shipments are something that's possible today, right? Because in the supply chain, as somebody said, was all about big movements, things going from place A to place B, but today it's all about micro shipments. And supply chains can be nimble enough to ensure that they can get the product at the right time to the right person. When I say this, because I'll tell you this, right? Logistics companies, if they have to send somebody the second time to someone's door to pay it, they're starting to lose money at that point in time. It's not a good idea for them. So can I have a nimble enough system that gets me to the right place at the right time? So for instance, if I'm not at home, but deliver to me elsewhere, it's quite possible. And systems are changing dramatically to enable that. And I think that's the way I see the world going. And in that sense, I would compare the world of supply chain to open banking. If you've heard the term open banking, where banks are opening up their data, engaging and providing customers products with other banks, collaborating together with fintechs, etc. I think supply chain and logistics companies are also starting to become platform providers. Like open banking, they can become open in nature and collaborate with their ecosystem and start becoming more nimble and create an ecosystem, right? So it's not like, so iPhone 13 launched today in India, you're not going to buy only the iPhone, you're going to buy a cover, you're going to buy a screen guard, etc., right? So the question is, how does this ecosystem work? And can a single logistics provider provide all that as a backbone to all the retailers, distributors, etc.? So I think the technology of the day, my message is technology of the day is very different. It provides for a path of the future. We can certainly look up to some of those companies like the Ubers and the DoorDashes of the world that are changing the term of what is a truly digital supply chain. Moving away from process thinking to event thinking is probably the way forward.
Absolutely, fantastic points, Sandeep, actually. And like you said, the digital native kind of organization, right? During the pandemic, I think without them, it would have been very difficult for us. Milk every day used to come at the same time that it was supposed to come, right? And that was because of the kind of digital and probably the supply chain processes they had put in place. So absolutely great points. One of the areas I think we still have time. One of the areas I think everybody sort of touched upon briefly was around omni channels, and without without such digital interventions in supply chain, having an omni channel presence for an organization would have been very difficult. Maybe with that, I'll request Sanjay to sort of share his views. In terms of how some of these omni-channel trends are coming forth, and where we are seeing digital sort of helping and driving this.
Okay. See, omni-channel is a very, very critical for any CPG group of companies. When I say consumer group of companies, I'm not only talking about FMCG, I'm talking about anybody and everybody in the consumer space. Now, if you really see the trends, what's going on in India, your e-commerce business are taking quite a significant chunk of the share. And the behavior of the consumers are significantly changing. Me as a consumer as well, if you ask me, starting from my grocery to food to anything and everything, possibly I buy it through one of these e-commerce service providers, right? So I think those e-commerce space, modern retail chains, consumer having their own delivery, companies are having their own delivery models through their internet portal, and the traditional, the distributors, those will remain. Okay, and they are also quite a significant chunk of the business. Now, since the preference of the consumers and the presence are slowly changing, it is becoming a very, very complex operation for any organization. Okay, and I think Sandeep was talking about single delivery. It is not a very large anymore, but also a single delivery is very, very important. So I think that is a space where digital is going to play a lot of role. One is that how do you make that things visible? I think Vivek wants to say something. Yes, Vivek.
So why don't you finish? I just had a couple of points to make. That's fine.
Yeah. So I think that is the space is going to be next couple of years. You will see a lot of innovations happening, both in terms of physical movement supported by digital innovations. Vivek, over to you. That's a very complex area, and we'll see a lot of innovations happening that side.
No, that's absolutely like the point I want to make was that I think omni-channel has always been around, but I think the shift to like the acceleration to digital has really made people to understand what omni-channel should be, right? So, for example, I would say a lot of retailers in the past, right, like always looked at e-commerce as a separate channel and stores as a separate channel, right? Because they were never built to kind of be truly omni-channel. So, if you look at even a small example saying where my inventories, are actually marked separately for e-commerce and separately for stores. Now, come Amazon or come, Target and come some of the other players, they changed the game and said, I could supply, any demand from anywhere, right? So I could supply my e-commerce demand from the stores, and many retailers were not just like set up for that because they are so like their systems are just not geared up for that, right? So like, when you talk about truly omni-channel, I think the biggest shift is we have to shift away from like the focus on touch points to actually focusing on journeys, right? And that's an important part because like for example in the same example now you look at like retailers trying to say okay like I'm going to do my planning of inventory, my replenishments, my like shipping, like ship from store, same day delivery, next day delivery. All of those models came about because they started to think about their business as a truly omni-channel one, right? Rather than saying, okay, I'm going to, fulfill my e-commerce demand from 2 warehouses in the country, and rest everything, will be from stores. So I think the concept I would say is that, like it needs a fundamental shift in thinking of saying that, it's like, anytime, anywhere, kind of a concept, and your systems have to, and to the point made earlier, I think that the technology is ripe enough today to actually enable that shift in thinking and shift in the business model. Because like when it gets, disrupted, like for example, a lot of people felt that, the COVID time was for them, like the stores were shut, right? Now, what do you do? Right. So the companies who were really kind of, who could move to a micro fulfillment centers, other like ways of fulfillment, which were like possible in a very short time, actually gained. And there were a set of, clear gainers and clear losers, because people who were not really, geared up to that, like obviously could not, overnight change that. So I think that's what I wanted to kind of have. My screen is frozen. Are you able to hear my screen?
We were able to hear, but I think the video sort of paused for a bit. Yeah, absolutely. And just one interesting point around omni-channel, we used to think that, consumers used to come to stores, ultimately buy in stores, but sort of do all the, the window shopping online. But I think it's the reverse trend now that people do all the shopping online. They come to the stores just because they want to just get out of the house, right? So that's a different reverse shift that we are seeing. So maybe Seetharam, I think you raised your hand. Maybe any point around that?
No, I just wanted to add a few points to what Vivek and Sanjay mentioned. So the omni-channel is becoming very, very important these days, especially for the brick and mortar stores who are conventionally running the business, and with the Amazons of the world coming in and pitching and taking away almost like 50% of their businesses. So they are trying to evolve into an omni-channel business where they can cater, especially the LFR categories. So during the pandemic, they were severely hit with the retail space. They were not able to open. So the sales were shut down and everything. So they've evolved, and then now moving into omni-channel space, especially from all the retail categories. Customer can go to their online space and then take the deliveries from the local space or something like that on a reverse category as such. Even the Amazon is opening up a retail store, right, in the US markets, just to make the consumer experience the products, right? But it is with a better use of digitization of the technology, and they're improving the consumer experience as such, right? So omnichannel, in a way, is the way forward as such for most of the consumer durable company going forward.
Excellent. Sandeep, you have a point? You're on mute, Sandeep.
Yeah, sorry, apologies for that. I do. One of the things that omnichannel has actually done, and people might not be noticing, or I don't know if people are, is that it's turning the restaurant industry on its head, because restaurants were built to serve people that came to eat or dine in them. But the digital natives and the apps around the world are spiking the demand up for restaurants from home, right? It's incredible. Most restaurants that I go to in recent times, I've always have a long queue of these guys who are standing to take food and deliver it to somebody's house. And restaurants aren't geared for it. So one of the new things that's happening, thanks to this whole omni-channel experience, that you can order into a restaurant from anywhere, anyhow, and is the cloud kitchen concept that's starting to come up, which is actually speaking digitally from a supply chain concept. It's a new business that's evolving, right? Cloud kitchens that restaurants can open across cities and then deliver to them. They don't really need to burden their existing. It goes back to the same thing that Vikas was saying. E-commerce had a different inventory and the store had a different inventory. The restaurants have had to do the opposite. They've actually had to keep different inventories from what's happening omni-channel and what the customers that come to their door, because otherwise they are not serving well enough and they're always burdened by a number of orders from outside through the apps. And it's an interesting thing, right? Omnichannel is doing both. It's bringing inventory together, it's separating inventory out, and it's a very, very interesting time that we live in.
Yes, absolutely. And Seetharam mentioned about Amazon opening stores. Amazon has stores which they just stock, the best reviewed products, and it's a hodgepodge of products, right? It's not really something which goes by any kind of shelf stuffing, rules or any principles. It's just a hodgepodge of random products which have been reviewed by the customers with that. So great. I think it has been a very interesting panel discussions. With that, I can hand over the stage to Isha now. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. I think all those inputs that you brought from our panelists there gave a way for our viewers to learn a lot. So a big thank you to you, Mr. Puri, Mr. Jangra, Mr. Seetharam S, Mr. Mukherjee, Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Aggarwal. It was fantastic listening to each one of you and putting those thoughts together. I'm sure that our viewers had a lot to learn from your digital journeys. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And at this point, let me remind our viewers that we are having some exciting gift vouchers all for you worth 5,000 rupees from ETH. So do continue to participate actively. May I request you to please fill the feedback forms and submit them, because that's how you can win some amazing gift vouchers. I'd also like to request you to please remember to tag us each time you put a comment or what you think about the summit using our hashtag ETGDI Summit. Let me also take a moment and thank all our partners and all our audience members for being a part of Intel Plus Oracle Presents. JP Morgan co-presents the Economic Times Global Digital Innovation Summit, co-powered by Brillio and Connect. And a big thank you to all our partners for their trust in us. Our presenting partner, Intel Plus Oracle, our co-presenting partner, JP Morgan, our co-powered by partner, Brillio and Connect, our cybersecurity partner, Process IT Global. Let me also thank our gold partner, Clear, from the makers of Clear Tax, our associate partners, HCL Technologies and Goldstone Technologies. We also have a very special zone for our startup partners. Do visit and encourage them, Credgenics, Whirlpool Tech, SatSure, Jal Technologies Prakriti, YCLEPT 4E Labs, and of course, our knowledge partners, Deloitte. The summit has been brought to you by EG Edge Unwired, and we still have a very exciting closing remarks session on the evolving landscape of supply chain 4.0, the present and the future for the ecosystem. In the next minute or so, we'll be introducing to you our next speaker, so please do stay tuned.